Hello, I'm Viviana, and it is my honor to introduce you to Vita Sapien, an organization that seeks to bring about a global transformation. At Vita Sapien, we forge groundbreaking innovations where eco-science meets eco-spirituality, all guided by a sustainable life philosophy. This philosophy is more than an idea. It's a growing movement to connect people through the mind and the heart to our living planet. Our research suggests that around 53 million people in the Western world alone share characteristics that we refer to as Vitan. Vita is Latin for life, so these are the life people. Specifically, life people love nature, trust science, and take action to make things better. Does this sound like you? What is missing, we believe, is a unifying philosophy that can help amplify the impact of life people in fostering a civilization that thrives with nature deep into the future. This sustainable life philosophy is called Vita Worldview, and it contains unique concepts that will help us weather this new age of global crisis and prevail beyond. Together, we can cultivate the blossoming of a remarkable era, the Verdant Age. The Verdant Age is not a dream. It is a potential reality. It is a future where humanity and the living planet thrive together in harmony, stretching deep into the long future. This is not just survival. It is flourishing for millions of species, for billions of people, for millions of years. At Vita Sapien, we believe that our birthright as humans is to thrive on Earth, and that the climate and ecological crises of today are not the end. They are merely challenges, stepping stones to something far greater. For nature lovers who respect science and take action, this is your time to shine. And Vita Worldview is a guiding light toward the main prize, the longevity and health of people and our beautiful living planet. Please take some time to familiarize yourself with Vita Sapien Organization and Vita Worldview. Thank you.
In the ocean deep and wide they glide. Whales are nature's gentle guide. With every dive and breach so grand, they carry carbon from the land.
Their mighty forms through currents weave a hidden role you won't believe. By stirring blooms in waters clear, they draw down carbon year by year.
Breathe in the ocean's gentle breeze. Feel the peace among the seas. Whales are whispers of the blue, nature's hope in view.
From the depths with power and grace, they lift nutrients to Earth's embrace. Phytoplankton rise, the bloom expands, sustaining life in ocean sands.
Through their feeding, life takes hold. Their ecosystem's tale is told. In their wake, the oceans thrive. Whales keep the carbon flow alive. Breathe in the ocean's gentle breeze. Feel the peace among the seas. Whales are whispers of the blue, nature's hope in view.
Their bodies vast, their spirits free, sink to depths, a legacy. Carbon stored for ages long, a cycle sealed in silent song.
Silent stewards, guardians wise, in their presence hope will rise. With every breath they play their part, connecting sea to nature's heart. Breathe in the ocean's gentle breeze. Feel the peace among the seas. a harmony of air and tide. Wells keep balance far and wide.
From ocean depths to surface bright, they move with strength, a guiding light, a living bridge of earth and sea, reminding us of unity.
Breathe in the ocean's gentle breeze, feel the peace among the seas. Wells are whispers of the blue, nature's hope in view. To the whales a pledge we make, for the future steps we take. Guardians of the ocean's lore, their song will echo evermore.
Hello again. I'm Dr. Peter Carter with a Climate Emergency Institute video. These videos are getting tougher and tougher and tougher because the emergency, which everybody recognized and acknowledged soon after the excellent IPCC 2018 1.5C report, everybody since has sort of, to them, the emergency has sort of disappeared. And obviously, the emergency is getting way, way worse, and very rapidly way, way worse. So I would really appeal for some help, for more and more experts, certainly, to get actively involved and engaged in this dire climate emergency, because it is dire. And also, we generally need some help to counter the denial campaign. There's still a dangerous climate change denial. So they deny in various ways nowadays. They're getting malevolently clever in how they do the denial. Social media is full of ridiculous, absurd denial statements. So I'm also looking for some help in countering this denial. Because really, the denial campaign, the deniers, of course, we all know where it originates from. It originates from the fossil fuel corporations. It also, of course, originates from the Republican Party of the United States, because it's not just President Donald Trump who is denying climate change. It's the whole Republican Party. People tend to forget about that because Trump's absurdness gets in the limelight. So since my last video, which wasn't very long ago, there's a lot of new, very important, and very bad news, of course, for us to discuss. First and foremost, clearly, we've had two back-to-back powerful hurricanes that scooted across the Gulf of Mexico, and both of them caused significant amount of damage, including death. Both of these hurricanes did things that none of the scientists or experts expected. So that's the way in which they're unprecedented. Helene, the death count, the fatalities from the hurricane and the extreme downpour of rain, which is caused directly by the fossil fuel industry, because caused by constant and increasing emissions. The origin is also from the big banks, the cause of all these deaths, cause of all this massive destruction. It's from the big banks. And thirdly, because I call this the axis of evil, thirdly, we have the big economy governments, okay, who not only are doing nothing to prevent these catastrophic impacts of global climate change, they're actually pushing more and more and more. These things don't just happen by themselves, right? Global warming doesn't happen by itself, right? Climate change doesn't happen by itself, okay? we've been changing the climate. So it sounds a little bit obvious, but I think the language is important. And it's very important for us to connect the dots as often as we can to all this death and destruction, to the cause of the death and destruction, to the corporations, the fossil.
Hello, I'm Viviana, and it is my honor to introduce you to Vita Sapien, an organization that seeks to bring about a global transformation. At Vita Sapien, we forge groundbreaking innovations where eco-science meets eco-spirituality, all guided by a sustainable life philosophy. This philosophy is more than an idea. It's a growing movement to connect people through the mind and the heart to our living planet. Our research suggests that around 53 million people in the Western world alone share characteristics that we refer to as Vitan. Vita is Latin for life, so these are the life people. Specifically, life people love nature, trust science, and take action to make things better. Does this sound like you? What is missing, we believe, is a unifying philosophy that can help amplify the impact of life people in fostering a civilization that thrives with nature deep into the future. This sustainable life philosophy is called Vita Worldview, and it contains unique concepts that will help us weather this new age of global crisis and prevail beyond. Together, we can cultivate the blossoming of a remarkable era. The verdant age. The verdant age is not a dream. It is a potential reality. It is a future where humanity and the living planet thrive together in harmony, stretching deep into the long future. This is not just survival. It is flourishing for millions of species, for billions of people, for millions of years. At Vita Sapien, we believe that our birthright as humans is to thrive on Earth, and that the climate and ecological crises of today are not the end. They are merely challenges, stepping stones to something far greater. For nature lovers who respect science and take action, this is your time to shine. And Vita Worldview is a guiding light toward the main prize, the longevity and health of people and our beautiful living planet. Please take some time to familiarize yourself with Vita Sapien organization and Vita Worldview. Thank you.
guide. With every dive and breach so grand, they carry carbon from the land.
Their mighty forms through currents weave a hidden role you won't believe. By stirring blooms in waters clear, they draw down carbon year by year.
Breathe in the ocean's gentle breeze, feel the peace among the seas. Whales are whispers of the blue, nature's hope in view.
From the depths with power and grace, they lift nutrients to Earth's embrace. Phytoplankton rise, the bloom expands, sustaining life in ocean sands.
Through their feeding, life takes hold. Their ecosystem's tale is told. In their wake, the oceans thrive. Whales keep the carbon flow alive. Breathe in the ocean's gentle breeze, feel the peace among the seas. Whales are whispers of the blue, nature's hope in view.
Their bodies vast, their spirits free, sink to depths, a legacy. Carbon stored for ages long, a cycle sealed in silent song.
Silent stewards, guardians wise, in their presence hope will rise. With every breath they play their part, connecting sea to nature's heart. Breathe in the ocean's gentle breeze, feel the peace among the seas. Whales are whispers of the blue, nature's hope in view. In their song the oceans sing, echoes of their journey ring. A harmony of air and tide, whales keep balance far and wide.
From ocean depths to surface bright, they move with strength, a guiding light. A living bridge of earth and sea, reminding us of unity.
Breathe in the ocean's gentle breeze, feel the peace among the seas. Whales are whispers of the blue, nature's hope in view. To the whales a pledge we make, for their future steps we take. Guardians of the ocean's lore, their song will echo evermore.
Hello again. I'm Dr. Peter Carter with a Climate Emergency Institute video. These videos are getting tougher and tougher and tougher because the emergency, which everybody recognized and acknowledged soon after the excellent IPCC 2018 1.5C report, everybody since has sort of, to them, the emergency has sort of disappeared. And obviously, the emergency is getting way, way worse, and very rapidly way, way worse. So I would really appeal for some help, for more and more experts, certainly, to get actively involved and engaged in this dire climate emergency, because it is dire. And also, we generally need some help to counter the denial campaign. There's still a dangerous climate change denial. So they deny in various ways nowadays. They're getting malevolently clever in how they do the denial. Social media is full of ridiculous, absurd denial statements. So I'm also looking for some help in countering this denial. Because really, The denial campaign, the deniers, of course, we all know where it originates from. It originates from the fossil fuel corporations. It also, of course, originates from the Republican Party of the United States, because it's not just President Donald Trump who is denying climate change. It's the whole Republican Party. People tend to forget about that because Trump's absurdness gets in the limelight. So since my last video, which wasn't very long ago, there's a lot of new, very important, and very bad news, of course, for us to discuss. First and foremost, clearly, we've had two back-to-back powerful hurricanes that scooted across the Gulf of Mexico, and both of them caused significant amount of damage, including death. Both of these hurricanes did things that none of the scientists or experts expected. So that's the way in which they're unprecedented. Helene, the death count, the fatalities from the hurricane and the extreme downpour of rain, which is caused directly by the fossil fuel industry, because caused by constant and increasing emissions. The origin is also from the big banks, the cause of all these deaths, cause of all this massive destruction. It's from the big banks. And thirdly, because I call this the axis of evil, thirdly, we have the big economy governments, okay, who not only are doing nothing to prevent these catastrophic impacts of global climate change, they're actually pushing more and more and more. These things don't just happen by themselves, right? Global warming doesn't happen by itself, right? Climate change doesn't happen by itself, okay? We've been changing the climate. So it sounds a little bit obvious, but I think the language is important. And it's very important for us to connect the dots as often as we can to all this death and destruction, to the cause of the death and destruction, to the corporations, the fossil fuel industry, the banking corporations, and the big economy governments. They must be held accountable for all this. And so far they are not being. They are getting away with murder. They're getting away with mass murder on a scale that we've never seen before in this short period of time of global climate change. So there's a final thing that I want to say about hurricanes, because it directly relates to the terrible thing that happened, Hurricane Helene, in those 5 states. We know, and we have always known, and it's often quoted, but never responded to because we're still allowing emissions to go up. We know that the more the lower atmosphere is warmed by greenhouse gases, the more moisture, the more wet, the more water vapor it can hold, okay? So as we're increasing our global warming, there's more and more and more rain. They call it potential rain up there. It's loaded, in other words. So what happened to Helene, and has happened to big cities in the United States, is that all of a sudden they let go all that water. But here's the thing, a recent scientific paper worked out and pointed out that the 7% increase per degree of centigrade of extra water doesn't uphold to tropical cyclones, hurricanes going over the Gulf of Mexico. That's a different situation. And in that situation, the water vapor, the water in the atmosphere, is increased 5 to 7 times per degree centigrade. So the water being dragged up by the hurricane over the Gulf of Mexico, much higher, much higher than the 7%, which is bad enough that we always quote. And heat waves, of course, are horrible. They're killing more and more people every couple of years in all regions of the populated world. But the scientists remind us that in actual fact, the torrential rain and the floods is the most damaging of the many impacts of climate change and extreme weather events. In the UK, they're getting heavier and heavier and heavier rain, and their fields got waterlogged, their agricultural fields got. It's resulted in a very large decline in agricultural production, food production of the UK. We're getting into dramatic extreme weather events and impacts of global climate change. By the very nature of the basic climate change science, everything that we are seeing is irreversible. And the reason for that is not just that we're not doing anything to stop and put emissions into decline, but as long as we are emitting greenhouse gases to any extent at all of these extreme weather events continue to increase. So a lot of people, because I guess they hope that it's true, a lot of people say that, oh, we can reverse climate change. No, impossible. You just cannot do it. Decades ago, when people started getting interested in climate change, the characteristic of the great inertia of the climate system, and therefore the great momentum of the climate system, was the key thing that the scientists were working on communicating, you know. And they used the example of the Titanic, right? Or of one of these great big tanker things, right? That's how the climate system works. You cut the engines to the Titanic or these things, they take miles to come to a stop. That's how the climate system is, inherently. So we may think it's nice to think that, oh, we can do something to reverse climate change. No way. We have committed our young people, certainly our children, to a absolutely terrible future over the next few decades. Now, that doesn't mean that we couldn't act in ways that allows the planet to recover. We can do that. The planet is, nature is resilient, but it'll take a long, long time. You know, I mean, we're talking hundreds of years, but it could be done. If we do what the IPCC says we have to do, and the IPCC 6th assessment says immediate action for rapid, immediate decline in global emissions. That's what the 6th assessment, the most recent assessment, the IPCC says. It's nowhere out there. I don't read it out there. We know that we have to force our governments, literally force our governments, to stop subsidizing fossil fuels and stop permitting fossil fuel extraction. Perhaps people think that our governments are looking after things or are going to look after things. Nothing could be further from the truth. Our governments are doing just the opposite, right? They're supporting the fossil fuel industry, and it is an industry that only has one end if it's allowed to continue, and that's a dead end. Fossil fuel industry is the ultimate dead end industry. And we've known for decades that it can be completely replaced by our brilliant renewable energy, totally replaced. So what's going on is not only unprecedented crime, it's not only an unprecedented evil crime, it's completely absurd. It's completely insane that this should be happening. And it bothers me because, well, I'm pushing 80. I'm not really what you'd call a climate activist, getting out there and, you know, holding up placards and things. But there's a few, far too few, climate protesters, peaceful protesters, right? We need to support them, and we're not. So when those protesters are dealt harshly, which they are dealt harshly by their governments and the courts, okay, for doing a peaceful protest, and they're incarcerated, they're giving jail terms. They really aren't getting very much public support by that. It's in our best interest, it's in our survival interest, it's in the interest of our own lives to give those protesters all the support we possibly can. So that's another appeal I'm putting out. The last thing I want to cover is what is the response of the scientific community to the accelerating, rapidly deteriorating climate emergency. Well, it's not very good. We have been at 1.5 degrees C, which has long been recognized. Everybody agrees, as I said, that 1.5 degrees C is the danger limit, right? Do not go to 1.5 degrees C, right? Because, so what are the, what's the scientific community doing? It's doing an extraordinary thing. It is to this day claiming that we can still limit to 1.5 degrees C. I've called that absurd. If they've read it, they don't like me because they're being very, very harsh on people who are disagreeing with them on the social media. But it's a fact. We've been at 1.5 degrees C, Copernicus says for 13 months. It's actually for 14 months because NOAA got the 1 month that we were just behind 1.5 degrees C at 1.5 degrees C. So we've been at 1.5 well over a year, or badly over a year. So to say that we can still hold to 1.5 degrees C is absurd. It's an untruth, okay? It's absolutely not true. It's very, very deceptive. I'm sure they don't mean to, but it is a help to the agenda of the fossil fuel industry and the investment banks and these governments, okay? It's a help to them because science decided not to actually tell the truth of where we're at because it's so terrible, presumably, right? Well, we are definitely at 1.5 degrees C. And the ice on this hopefully has just been broken because the, and this, I don't think this was widely publicized because there was one paper, The Telegraph in the UK, and they did an interview with the IPCC chair, who's been the chair for the past couple of years. Dr. H. Lee was the chair before that, and he did some excellent work. Jim Ski sat down with a reporter from the Telegraph, and he said that humanity has lost the opportunity to hold the climate, to hold global temperature to 1.5 degrees C. And he said it would take a heroic effort to limit warming to 2 degrees C. A heroic effort. 2 degrees C, since the mid-1990s, has been the danger limit. But as the science information came in on our impacts, how severe, and decades sooner than the models predicted, okay? It was very, very clear, and it was made very clear in the 1.5C report. 2C is catastrophe on a global basis and on a planetary basis, because all the tipping points get triggered. You know, the most feared one, probably the permafrost thaw and melt, releasing more and more greenhouse gases. It's happening today. Permafrost is melting all around the Arctic and the subarctic region, everywhere. And it is emitting all three of the major greenhouse gases. It's emitting carbon dioxide. That may surprise people because we've been afraid of its well-known methane emissions. That's what we've been afraid of. But actually, it's emitting more CO2 than methane. So this is why actually the carbon sink of the Arctic has been a carbon sink, that's been reversed. The Arctic is now a small carbon source because it's emitting much more CO2 than we ever anticipated. It's emitting methane, of course, and we know that the wetlands worldwide are emitting more methane. We know that because the atmospheric methane has gone up, and scientists have done isotope measurements on the methane, and it's coming from the wetlands, and there are huge, huge wetlands in the world. So CO2, methane, but also nitrous oxide. The permafrost, as it thaws, is also emitting some nitrous oxide. The scientists are completely agreed that permafrost thaw and permafrost emissions of greenhouse gases, the carbon greenhouse gases, is irreversible. They are completely agreed on that. There was a report which comes out fairly regularly, and it was the state of the cryosphere by the scientists that make up what's called the Cryosphere Initiative, and they really made it very clear indeed. We need to be frightened, really we do, you know. If we're rational, reasonable, intelligent beings, we need to understand what's happening to our planet. We need to be frightened. Right? This brings me to my last, most shocking state of the climate change science. Here's the situation. In 2023, this huge increase in the global surface temperature increase, but just went up like this, part of which was the El Nino. We've had no El Nino this year, but there was an El Nino which boosts surface warming. But the scientists say that the El Nino was not powerful enough to kick up the global temperature increase as it did in 2023. And as I say, it kicked it up by a very large margin, way above the last record, which was an El Nino in 2015-16. So way above that record, doesn't even compare. If you look at the IPCC IR6 projections, and you put 2023 on the line of the projections, right? The line that it hits is the very worst case scenario. So I tried my best to put it out last year that we are actually now tracking slightly above the very worst case scenario that the scientists have worked out could ever happen. This scenario is called 8.5, SSP 5, various things before it, but it's 8.5 watts per square meter. That's the radiative forcing, that's the heating. We've never produced and burnt more coal than we're burning today. 10 years ago it reached a peak, and it's just stayed on that peak. So a big reason for us tracking a bit above the worst case scenario is that the world is still allowing coal to be burnt. The very worst thing. Atmospheric carbon dioxide concentration is increasing at an accelerating rate, right from the beginning of the monitoring in 1958 by Scripps Institute in San Diego, right up to this year of 2024, CO2 has been increasing at an accelerating rate. Just been doing this. Just been doing that. And the past few years, that rate has kicked up faster than any other time. We know there's something else, but it's not being put out there. And the something else is that our carbon sinks are beginning to lose efficiency. The Global Carbon Project for the past 3 years, they do all things carbon, they do it every year. 3 years ago said that the global carbon sinks, the ocean and the land, were beginning to lose efficiency. They were not drawing down as much carbon as they've been doing sort of for us for the past many decades. That's terrifying, believe me. Absolutely terrifying, because those carbon sinks have buffered our emissions increased by about 50%. So, the scientists have long ago projected that the carbon sinks would start to fail. The models were very uncertain about when that would happen. But the sixth assessment said it would definitely happen. They got some very good illustrations to make it clear. They didn't think it would happen until after 2050, the second part of this century. Well, it's been happening, and we know it's been happening for the past 5 years. There's a report just out that last year the planet sunk 0 amounts of carbon, like negligible amounts of carbon. So for a year, in that extreme, hottest ever year that we've had, we should really understand that that hit the carbon sinks so hard, that temperature increase, that they didn't function as they've been doing. The negligible amounts of carbon were sunk. instead of 50% of our emissions. The Global Carbon Project that I've already mentioned, very recently, a month or two ago, published their second assessment of methane and their second assessment of nitrous oxide. They found on each case that the world is tracking the worst case scenario. Yes, it's time to panic. It really is time to panic. I don't detect any panic out there at all. They also found that methane and nitrous oxide emissions were tracking the worst case scenario. The data and the scientific projections and assessments now find that all three greenhouse gases are going up faster than anybody ever believed they could. Okay, so what is our hope? You and me. That's the hope, right? It's the real hope for the future. We just have to do a few things. We just have to communicate with a few people, right? We just have to work, and it's easy work, so that yet again the entire world realizes that we are in a global climate planetary emergency. So that consciousness, which was there, very high, all kinds of jurisdictions and governments were declaring climate emergencies after that 2018 IPCC report came out. But it sort of drifted away. We've got to put that back. That's not hard to do. We've got to harass our politicians to immediately stop subsidizing fossil fuels. That is an unprecedentedly evil crime, as I mentioned before, and there's no question about that, right? You cannot give money in order for corporations to continue to destroy the planet, to destroy the future, to wipe out the future, right? You cannot do that and it not be described as how it is, and those corporations, those fossil fuel corporations, governments, not held accountable. While our governments are putting away these few young protesters into jail, there's no accountability on their actions and policies that are destroying the future. And those young people know that. The hope actually is, and people are right about that, that we can make use of the resiliency of nature, the resiliency of climate change. But the resiliency of nature will not come into effect until we have stopped emitting all fossil fuels. And then it will take years to come into effect. But if we make that happen, that's the hope, right? So it's not that we don't have a possibility of hope. No, we do, because we know everything that has to be done. We've known it for decades, as many people have said. But we actually have the nuts and bolts today, way more than the nuts and bolts that we need, right? We can replace fossil fuel energy many times over now. It's not just that we can do it many times over by today's renewable energy science and technology. And that's great, and that's really good to focus on, okay? But you have to also focus on the fact that fossil fuel energy is being increased at about the same rate that renewable energy is being increased, okay? So it's actually not really hopeful enough, to be telling everybody about our great renewable energy if you don't make it clear that renewable energy can and has to completely replace, or, there's various terms for it now. I mean, that's out in the world now, Everybody agrees that we have to phase out fossil fuel energy. Everybody agrees that we have to transition from fossil fuel energy to renewable energy. That's out there now. It's only been out there for a few years. Yeah, so that's very hopeful. I'm going to finish this with a quote years and years ago. Thank you for listening.
Vita Sapien organization helps people understand the changes taking place in the world and how we can care for nature and our future. We have been working towards creating Vita Sapien TV, a live stream channel that will share Vita's unique content around the clock, 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, 365 days a year. Vita Sapien TV content will include new and existing Vita interviews with sustainability experts, commentary on extreme weather events, Vita Sapien music, tips about how to live earth-friendly lives, plus other information relevant to Vita's core themes. We have secured access to specialist software, but need resources for a dedicated computer, broadband Wi-Fi, and other costs associated with video production, graphic design, producing content, and reaching out to viewers. The resources will enable us to set up the Vita TV channel, develop a program schedule, access and create the content, and start running Vita TV. This will be an epic learning exercise and help us to reach out to the 53 million people who can help humanity and the biosphere survive the 21st century and thrive beyond. Please help if you can. Thank you.
Mycelium threads weaving below, connecting the roots where the forests grow. Fungi of wisdom, silent and sly, in your hidden work the forest will thrive. Beneath the soil where shadows dwell, fungi whisper their stories to tell. Threads of life, a vast unseen web. Through roots and earth, their signals are spread. They carry messages, secrets shared. From tree to tree, the forest prepared. A network deep, a mind profound. The silent pulse of the
January 2025. Huge wildfires strike Los Angeles, seen here burning into their 5th day. While Los Angeles is no stranger to wildfire, they used to burn only in the summer months, fanned by the dry Santa Ana winds. These wildfires are burning in the heart of winter, and in just the first 5 days have scorched hundreds of thousands of acres. They have displaced equivalent numbers of people, destroyed around 20,000 structures, many of which were homes, and killed dozens of people. Particularly hard hit is the Pacific Palisades area to the west of the city and Altadena in the north. A massive firefighting effort is underway on the ground and in the air. Dozens of helicopters and fixed-winged aircraft are dropping water and flame retardant to help contain the fires. This is shaping up to be one of the most devastating fires in the region, with potentially hundreds of billions of dollars in damages. While wildfires are natural to this region, the changing climate has exacerbated them, particularly through a phenomena called weather whiplashing. In weather whiplash, extreme rainfall exacerbates plant growth and then extreme heat kills off the plants, creating a huge source of tinder-dry fuel. While firefighters hope for weather changes to help bring the fires under control, reining in climate change is a whole different story. Climate change is a man-made catastrophe that has been growing for centuries. To resolve this crisis, we need a worldview that can properly frame the problem and the response. Vita Worldview is a sustainable life philosophy that combines eco-science with eco-spirituality to provide the knowledge and drive to sort this climate change problem once and for all. Read Vita Worldview today and become part of the movement to survive the 21st century and thrive thereafter.
Pampers are Punami proof with a revolutionary stop and protect pocket to help prevent leaks at the back. Pampers.
New Pantene Molecular Bond Repair with 5,000 Pro V NutriPearls. Shop now.
So we believe that it's beholden on us to do everything that we can to look after our home and to look after the greater body that we're all part of. So in Vita Sapien, we feel that if we can awaken people to the interconnectedness between different life forms, different ecosystems, different natural processes, and when we look at the science of that, it's just astounding. It really is awe-inspiring and amazing.
Hello everybody, I'm Paul Beckwith. I'm sitting at the COP15, which is the conference on biodiversity that's going on in Montreal, Quebec, Canada at the moment. And I've got Nick Bestivar with me. Nick is going to tell us all about Vita Sapien. I got the badge along with colleagues from the Vita Planeta Limited organization, which is based in Australia. You know, Nick has a pivotal role. He can explain a bit about who he is and how he got involved in Vita Sapien and what the main messages are.
Thanks very much, Paul. It's great to be here with you. Lovely to meet you again, finally. So I got involved with Vita Sapien earlier this year. I've always had a love of nature, and I've always had an interest in spirituality. But funnily enough, I never really found that any of the religions appealed to me. So I was looking for something, some way to nurture my spirit, and I found it through Vita Sapien. It's what I've been looking for in terms of being a spiritual framework that is grounded in science and is ecological or nature-based.
So I gather that you met Guy Lane at some point, and maybe over a few beers he got you involved, or how did that work?
Yes, indeed. Actually, our first meeting was in the Regatta Hotel in Brisbane, a fine old hotel, And yeah, we'd had some conversations. We'd met through mutual associates and had some conversations about the state of the world and the state of the environment, the state of the climate. Yeah, it became apparent that we had some common interests there. I had previously done a project, an eco-spirituality project, and so I had an introduction through a mentor into the world of eco-psychology. And it turned out that this was the essence of Guy's work as well. So we found that we were resonating on so many levels and just sort of started to have more and more conversations. And I've found that Vita Sapien is now my main vehicle, I guess, for appreciating nature and appreciating living a good life, a spiritual life. And to the extent that I've become a director of the organisation just a couple of months ago, just before preparing to come here to the COP.
Thank you. So I've had a look at your very interesting and informative website, and also you've got this booklet on, I mean, you're calling it ecological spirituality, but I guess, you know, when I look at it, it's almost like a different philosophy, you know, a different way to view the planet. And, you know, it's very much along the lines of James Lovelock's ideas of so-called Gaia, you know, where the Earth is one, you know, everything's interconnected. We know that. And we need a lot more people, you know, scientists, to look at the connections between the different elements. And there's all kinds of different feedbacks and things that are going on, which can either work against us. You know, most of the feedbacks in the climate system are against us at the moment. For example, you know, as we lose more and more sea ice, the Arctic warms more and more, and that disrupts the jet stream further, and that leads to more and more, you know, a lightening of the Arctic. It's not as, or darkening rather, of the Arctic, so it's absorbing more sunlight, and we get these vicious feedbacks where things sort of cascade. So, you know, humanity is the biggest feedback that can reverse this. So can you maybe talk about some of the key points for people that aren't familiar with, like, what does Vita Sapien mean, and what are some of the key points of this philosophy or spirituality, as you call it?
So yes, Vita Sapien is inspired partly by James Lovelock's work. The difference being that his paper was a scientific hypothesis about the planet could be considered to be an organism in itself, all the life on the planet, in that it regulates its own temperature. So the paper is about self-regulation of by and for the biosphere. Whereas Vita Sapien's concept of Imperium Vitae Planeta, that's our term for the biosphere, our concept of it is more of a spiritual belief. So it's a belief in an overarching entity that we are all part of. All of us and all life on Earth can be considered cells in the body of the planetary body of life. So that's one of the aspects of Vita Sapien. And of course, humans are the most powerful or empowered entities to be able to have an effect on the state of that body of life. So we believe that it's beholden on us to do everything that we can to look after our home and to look after the greater body that we're all part of. So in Vita Sapien, we feel that if we can awaken people to, as you spoke before about the interconnectedness between different life forms, different ecosystems, different natural processes, and when we look at the science of that, it's just astounding. It really is awe-inspiring and amazing. And so in Vita Sapien, we seek to present that information to people in a way that fosters this kind of a sense of awe and a sense of amazement about the place that we live. If we can foster this kind of peak experience for people on a regular basis, then we believe that we can awaken them to the wonder of the planet, the wonder of the biosphere. And what we've found is that when you are so connected with, so awakened to that amazing vision of the whole biosphere, then you tend to want to take care of it. It naturally arises that you want to take care of something that you love, something that you feel part of, something you feel connected to. So this is the thing that Vita Sapien is primarily trying to achieve for millions of people around the planet.
Yeah, and personally, I think that part of the problem is that throughout human history, right, throughout our development of agriculture and cities, and the development from becoming hunter-gatherers sort of to being what we call advanced civilization. I mean, I'd question whether we can use that term advanced, you know, and also our brains have actually evolved quite a bit, you know, through this development, but we still have this sort of fight or flight instinct, this amygdala, which, you know, you see something, there's fear, there's emotion, you want to respond. And, you know, if you think about humans before we had structures and things, we'd be living in, say, forests or jungles, and there'd be lots of noises at night, and we'd have fires, and we'd sort of gather around fires and be in groups of people as sort of protection against nature. So there was a big fear of nature. And I think that fear of nature is deeply ingrained in many people still. And that's part of the reason why we haven't valued nature, and why we've been quite content to, not content, but why, you know, as civilizations develop, we've destroyed lots of nature, and we're continuing to destroy lots of nature. So this Vita Sapien seems to be, you know, a very needed sort of philosophical turn in human conscious to say, well, okay, we're continuing to trash the planet. You know, we've got to stop this. And I love your poster there of the person falling into the deep abyss. So what you're talking about is how to stop that fall and turn it around. But I mean, you don't really want to go back to civilization as it is. Like, you want to have sort of a new type of thing emerging from all of this. So you're in Australia, you know, are you getting lots of traction in Australia? How are you finding the COP conference, this conference? I mean, you're making lots of connections with people. There's lots of like-minded people. I mean, are you getting a lot out of the conference? And you know, are you optimistic going forward? I mean, because I think a lot of young people really like these ideas.
Absolutely, Paul. I mean, I have personally been speaking to a lot of young people here at the COP, and they obviously see the writing on the wall. They are aware, the people here at least, are aware of what science is telling us about what's coming. And many young people that I've spoken to outside of the COP as well, you know, in day-to-day life, are also aware. And so they are all of the ones I've spoken to have been very open, very receptive, very enthusiastic about Vita Sapien's message. And many of the older people that we've talked to here as well have also been very receptive. Some not so much. Their agenda lies elsewhere. And we respect that, but we judge that we only need to reach a certain proportion of people in order to create a massive shift of pro-ecological behaviour in enough people that will make a difference. I'd like to just comment on the picture of the man over here. We actually regard him as the rising sinking man, or the sinking rising man, because on the one hand, science tells us what's coming if we don't significantly change our trajectory. But there's also a great potential in that to transform our societies, to transform the way that we live. Personally speaking, we are going to have to transform as a planetary species. We're going to have to transform one way or another. Great changes are going to come. And it's really up to us as to how we fashion the future that's ahead of us. This is why Vita Sapien has at its heart the symbol of hope, which is contained in this symbol of the Quen. Let me see if I have another piece here that shows it. Ah, yes. So here's one I prepared earlier. So I'm not sure if you'll be able to see that, but so this is actually one of the Vita Sapien's symbols of hope. This is the symbol of the verdant age, which is a potential future time where humanity has learned to live in harmony with the biosphere, to live as part of the biosphere. And it's a very exciting time to be alive at the moment, because we have this potential to thrive, for all beings on Earth to thrive.
Now, one thing I've noticed in perusing the website and the booklet, and what I've heard or gathered from talking to you and also to Guy Lane, is that it's very science-based. Like you're looking at science-based changes, degradation of the climate system, and there's a video that Guy Lane did last year in 2021 with Stuart Scott, who's been very sort of key to myself being at these COPs. He invited me to the first one in Lima, Peru. Said, I've got air miles, just get down here. You can stay in a convent with him and a bunch of other people. So we did that, and I did that. And, ever since I've been going to, various COPs, and, also met many people like Heidi and Charles through Stuart. So Stuart was kind of pivotal. So it's very science-based. There's some very good graphs from the scientist Will Steffen, who I didn't realize was Australian, about sort of talking about the uninhabitable Earth and, the hothouse Earth, whereas if you pass certain points, you can head down and it's very, very science-based. And there has been more papers recently, peer-reviewed scientific papers, talking about the end game for humanity, and is it possible? They're starting to actually acknowledge that we're actually heading completely in the wrong direction, and you eventually reach where you're heading, which is a much less pleasant Earth. I mean, we basically if we trash our Earth, it's misery for people in the future that haven't been born yet. And you've mentioned a lot of these sort of things, the so-called doomers, and there's different ways of dealing with this. Like I see with this type of philosophy, it's a way of combating eco-grief, especially in young people, young women who don't want to have children, for example. I mean, that's one of your focuses, right? To give people this sort of hope. And, the doomers ridicule people that have hope, and they have a term called hopium for it. And yet I argue, hope is a fundamental, it's in human nature. If we don't have hope, then what's the point of anything, right? So is there some work in Australia that you're specifically doing to deal with the eco-grief that younger people are having?
Well, actually, Paul, this is what we're working on at the moment, is developing programs that will specifically be able to address these issues that people are facing, especially young people, of course. I mean, the opposite of hope is despair. And personally, I regard despair as being, it's basically an error, because you can't definitively see the future and what will happen. And there is always the possibility of a positive critical mass being reached, at which point things change dramatically in a positive direction. That, I think, is the source of hope for me. And the other reason that I personally cultivate hope in myself on a daily basis is that when I have hope, then I'm able to be in action. If I'm able to be in action, then I'm able to make a difference toward the kind of future that I personally would like to live in. I would say that as a Vita Sapien, I would consider that the ending of the game may be approaching us, but the game is not ended yet.
One of the sticking points with people with eco-grief is, or any other thing that causes some sort of depression, or it's paralyzing. It's completely paralyzing. You don't really feel like doing much. So with the you have the little bit of hope, and then you take some action, and that's a very strong feedback, because taking a little bit of action leads to more action, and we hear inspiring stories about the an Indian, poor Indian farmer who goes and plants an entire forest by himself. He just goes out every day and plants trees, and he's got whole entire forests planted. Or the whole idea of ecosystem restoration, I think, is very important, and that's one thing that I'm seeing continuously discussed at this conference. Taking large tracts of land that have been degraded by humans and restoring ecosystems, sort of nudging the nature along. I mean, if you give nature a chance, it can recover quite quickly, and we've seen that in many different case studies around the planet. And then there's other people, more technology minded, that are talking about carbon capture, but biomimicry or nature-based solutions. That sort of language is becoming more and more prevalent in the COPs, that both in COP27 and certainly in this COP. That alone should give hope to many people.
Absolutely. The other thing that I would like to put forward to your viewers is that we've developed this booklet that you have there, the Vita Sapien Pass Around Pocketbook. This booklet summarises our message and sort of presents as an introduction to what Vita Sapien is all about. It's organised into chapters for easy reading, and it takes about 30 minutes to an hour, depending on the individual, to read and absorb its contents. And we did that because we wanted a way to very easily and quickly give people a message of optimism and of hope, and to open their eyes to a way that they can start to take these small actions in their daily lives. And that book is downloadable from our website as well, vitasapien.org. That's vitasapien.org. And so it's freely available. We're giving these away, freely available to everyone. And in the back of the book is some pages where people can write down a little note of inspiration or reflection, and then they can pass on the book to somebody else to read as well. Guy always jokes that if you put your name and details in the very back of the book, in the very last box, then you might actually get the book returned to you at the end with all the comments in it from other people. And wouldn't that be amazing?
Thank you. And I've noticed that you have these, they're like sort of like playing cards. Now, I don't think we can play poker with them, unfortunately, but what are you using these for? I've seen them actually lying on various tables around the conference. So it's either you or Guy or somebody else who's been, putting them there, or...
Yeah, absolutely. These were actually Guy's brainchild. He came up with the brilliant idea to create these little cards that just have a very, very attractive image on the front, a very eye-catching image, and just a very brief message, a simple message on the back. Now, a few of these cards are designed to give people information that will open their eyes to the situation that we're in, because a lot of people at the moment don't fully realise what we're facing at the moment. For example, that the technosphere now outweighs the biosphere. So according to a recent paper, the mass of the man-made built environment outweighs the mass of the natural environment on the planet. And on the back of the card there is a reference to the paper, so you can actually go and have a look at the scientific paper for those who are interested. And then it just gives a brief summary of Vita Sapien. Vita Sapien is an ecological spirituality grounded in the environmental sciences. And then, of course, the website address there. So a few of those have been put together to give people that message, and then a couple of them are giving a positive message as well. So we give these away as a set so that people have got both the serious information as well as the positive or optimistic information. This one, I really love this one, Vita Sapien's Golden Rule. So most of the world's religions actually share a common tenet, do unto others as you would have them do unto you, or some variation of that. But they, in that tenet, they don't include the living planet, the biosphere, the home that we all live on. So Vita Sapien's Golden Rule is do unto others and the living planet as you would have them do unto you. So we feel that really completes the picture.
Okay, now when I was at the COP27, I was on an interfaith panel with people representing Judaism, Islam, Christianity, and there was a banner that these different groups put together that had different passages from different religious texts, the Bible or the Quran or whatever, and it was about what that religion thought about the earth that we live on, and like I say, there's this dual thing because, on the one hand, part of our brain has this fear for nature and, wild beasts, and that's been to our detriment because we still have that brain wiring. It's just evolved. We've had higher and higher levels building up on that basic brain level, but that's sort of the lowest level, which is the base of our emotions. When we see a tiger running at us or a shark, or we have this fear, right? But we're trying to overcome that. We still have a person brain, in modern day, is what it comes down to. If you talk to psychologists, it's really fascinating. So this is really a way of changing that, getting at the root of that and putting it into something, we're in symbiosis with nature. We can't be against nature. We can't be destroying nature. So are there any last thoughts that you would like to make about this? I mean, how are you surviving minus 10 Celsius in Montreal, being from Australia? You like
Yes, that's actually quite an adventure. I'm actually quite liking it, though. I was able to come with good equipment, good layers, so it's all about the layers. But I would actually like to comment on your point before about the reptilian brain and the fear of nature. I guess that I have to speak personally here. I guess that when I look at a lot of indigenous cultures, I see that they live with the reality of the risks of nature every day, and they still yet carry in their hearts a great love for the land that they live in, the land that they live with, and the various living beings that they share it with. And I think that what we can develop is, I think that we can transform our fear into a respect for nature and for those parts of nature that would do us harm if they could. I think that we can learn to govern that kind of base fear of nature, especially living here in the West. There aren't that many risks to us here. Yeah, so I think that we can learn to live with respect and humility and honouring the natural world. And I'd also like to just mention about, you spoke about religions before and how they view the natural world. And I'd like to emphasize, I think, that Vita Sapien is a spiritual framework or a philosophy that we intended to be used, I guess, or to be taken on board alongside of any other spiritual belief or spiritual system that anybody has and holds dear to their heart. It's really meant to be as a complement to other religious practices, religious beliefs, or spiritual practices that people may have.
Yeah, I mean, it's a different way of connecting with nature, irregardless of what other beliefs you may have. And, also, I think it gets at sort of, I mean, we think that we're rational, logical people being humans, but, we have this logical side of our brain and we have this emotional side, and the emotional side is quite often not logical. I mean, I ask people, what their greatest fear is. Well, fear of sharks. Have you ever swum in the ocean? No. Well, how is this ever going to be possible that this is just an irrational fear, right? And the way we weigh risks in our society is often irrational as well. So when the probability of something is very, very low, but it'll affect every single person on the planet, then multiply those two numbers together, and the risk is significant. And we don't weigh those correctly either. So. Anyway, it's been a pleasure chatting with you today about Vita Sapien and about your great work at the COP here. So thank you, and thank you for watching and supporting. Please support Climate Emergency Forum by sharing our work and clicking on the links and subscribing. So thank you.
system unseen but it gleams. Execute optimal foraging strategies to acquire financial surplus with ease. For ease. We chase the surplus, we chase the thrill. Comfort and fun bend to our will. Spend the financial surplus on fleeting delight. As the earth spins faster, day turns to night. Turn billions of liters of oil into micrograms of dopamine. A dance of desire in the superorganism stream. Through growth and decay we march in unison to survive the simplification yet to come. Build and consume on a finite plane, ignoring the losses, forgetting the pain. A system so vast it blinds our eyes, while the biosphere falters and balance dies. The truth we make feeds the machine, a cycle of hunger, relentless, unseen. The surplus grows, but the cost is steep. A reckoning brews in the shadows we keep. Turn billions of liters of oil into micrograms of dopamine. A dance of desire in the superorganism stream. Through growth and decay we march in unison to survive the simplification yet to come. Beware the superorganism, its endless sprawl. The great simplification will come to call. Put your efforts to bend, not break, for the future of life is ours to make. Turn billions of liters of oil into micrograms of dopamine. A dance of desire in the superorganism stream. Through growth and decay we march in unison to survive the simplification yet to come.
So the pioneering work that Vita Sapien is doing is not only looking at the eco-spirituality aspect, but also trying to be disciplined in the way that we communicate spirituality. And the reason why spirituality, I think, is really important is because it is that thing that drives people to do extraordinary things.
Welcome to another edition of the Climate Emergency Forum. My name is Regina Valdez, and I'll be your host for the evening. And we have on our show a very special guest. We have Guy Lane, who is a founder of Vita Sapien. So just a brief introduction of Guy. He is an environmental scientist, an author, an entrepreneur. So he conceived in 2016 this idea of a non-theistic spiritual philosophy that he believed was grounded in the needs of the age. This is something that is certainly near and dear to my heart. I know I've spoken about the importance of spirituality, about respect for the planet, about a sense of awe and wonder that is this planet and the fact that we are all here. It's my thought that it's going to be very difficult to move forward in terms of healing the planet, healing humanity and all other living beings that share this planet without this mind-heart shift. So I'm really, really interested to hear what Guy has to say and to see how our thoughts may be similar in this respect. So I'm going to give it up to Guy. Guy, can you please share with us a bit about yourself and your organization?
Yeah, thanks, Regina. That's a lovely introduction. So in my 20s, I spent a couple of years working in the oil industry, international offshore oil exploration. And that was when I first had this really clear insight that there was something fundamentally wrong in the relationship between humans and the planet. I remember standing on the bow of a ship off the coast of Taiwan and looking at the plastic bags drifting by. This was 30 years ago. And I knew that it was wrong. I mean, it took me maybe 20 years or 15 years to understand why it was wrong. And that's sort of like a distinction that I think is really important. And this is the sort of spiritual component. You know, one of the aspects of spirituality is this sort of sense of right and wrong. What happened was I was doing a master's of business, and in 2015, the Pope Francis wrote the document called the Laudato Si. It's an encyclical, a papal teaching that basically said that it's sinful to destroy the planet. And I thought, great, well, look, there's 1.2 billion Catholics. If they, this is the great transition of the Catholic faith, problem solved, right? We got the foot soldiers, hierarchical organization. If the big boss says that we should stop killing the planet, problems, over for, significant proportion of the problem. But then, of course, a year later, it's sort of, there wasn't really any follow-up to this. And then I realized that it wasn't really possible for an institution like mainstream religion to be able to pivot far or fast enough in order to actually make a meaningful difference in the time that we've got left. And the reason for that is because their founding documents predate the scientific revolution, like the Bible in the case of the Catholic Church. And they've built 2,000 years of practice, which is often hostile to the environment. The conquistadors were accompanied by the Catholics. And so I realized then that this huge chunk of humanity wasn't really able to fully participate in this transition. So I started looking at the New Age spiritual movement to see what was in that. And between the New Age spiritual movement and mainstream religions, which accommodates most people's spiritual views, there's practically nothing of real substance that can help us address the climate and ecological crisis in a really fundamental and directly and clearly spoken way. There are fragmentary references to these things throughout. And what I realized was we needed some sort of a spiritual philosophy that had the word Anthropocene in it, that had the words ocean acidification in it. It needed to be very direct, and it needed to be focused on the best available science and to continually update with the best available science to give us the clearest picture of what we need to do to get out of the mess. And I looked around for that, but I couldn't find it. So I sat down one day, this is on the 18th of August, and I wrote I think about a 2,000-word essay and said, look, what we need is a religion devoted to Gaia. And I looked up the Australian taxation regulations about how to set up a religion in Australia, which needed a belief in a supernatural and the canons of conduct to give effect to the belief. So I just wrote this into my essay, and then I flipped the essay up onto LinkedIn and then went off and did something else, right? Forgot all about it. But then a couple of days later, I got contacted by a guy that ran a PR company in Malaysia who invited me to Malaysia to speak about this new earth-based religion, which I'd conceived but hadn't actually planned to do anything with. So I had 2 months to prepare for this meeting, and so I just continued to embellish and to work on the idea. And that's been going on since August 2016. What I came to realize early on was that religion wasn't the proper frame of reference. What we were really looking at was a spiritual philosophy. When you talk to most people about religion, if they are religious people, they're only interested to really hear about their religion. And if they're not religious people, then they're not really interested to talk about it. It simply isn't the right frame of reference. So we sort of changed the focus of the work to sort of focus on a spiritual philosophy. And through my master's, I did an independent study unit where I got all this scientific literature around spirituality, a big thick pile of papers. And I went through them. And one thing that was really clear was that even amongst the academic literature, it was very difficult to find anything really substantive to help you understand the subject of spirituality. And so in order for me to be able to effectively communicate what I was going on about, I needed to create some sort of frame of reference. And that's part of the work that I've been doing, is to help create a frame of reference by which people can understand the subject of spirituality, so that then we can talk about how spirituality can be employed as a part of this transition to a sustainable future. And so there's actually a little table in the little blue book that I hand out with 6 key points. So I regard spirituality as an umbrella concept that shelters a whole bunch of themes, and I've selected out the key themes. And so awe, wonder, and amazement is one of those themes you just mentioned. Answers to life's big questions is one of those themes, and so forth. So the pioneering work that Vita Sapien is doing is not only looking at the eco-spirituality aspect, but also trying to be disciplined in the way that we communicate spirituality. And the reason why spirituality, I think, is really important is because it is that thing that drives people to do extraordinary things, right? And some institutions know how to actually use spirituality as a tool for their own ends. For example, I'll give you two extreme examples. The born again Christian movement are absolute masters at having somebody talk to somebody on the street, and within 3 weeks, they're ensconced in a local church, paying 10% of their pre-tax income, reading the Bible, and effectively through appealing to a spiritual questions, they get people to make radical personal behavioral change. Okay. Another example of that, even more extreme again, and again, the purpose of Vita Sapien is not to do what those people do, right? But another example is how ISIS recruits 20-year-old kids who are only really interested in football and smoking cigarettes, and in the space of 4 months turns them into frontline fighters for the caliphate in 4 months. But by not appealing to their rational mind, appealing to spirituality, appealing to their sense of meaning, appealing to their sense of where they come from and where they are going and where they are now in this grand schema. And so I'm thinking, and so this is the most powerful motivator of human behavior, and it's been overlooked by the environmental movement. There is obviously people involved in eco-spirituality that spread the ideas, but if you actually look at the extent to which that philosophy has penetrated into society, it's really, really, really negligent. And so the idea of Vita Sapien was to try and find the tools by which we could tap into people's spirituality to connect them to the awe and wonder of this living planet, that we could then find the tools by which we could have that spiritual connection then manifest through the actions and inactions, and to basically help people find the wherewithal within them to actually do what is necessary to fix the crisis. Because at the moment, today, the crisis is not being fixed. We're still losing. And so the idea was to try and use spirituality as a tool, if you like, or to understand how spirituality can actually invoke people to stand up and do what's necessary. When we were going through the paperwork for the Charity Commission, we were asked how many Vitans were there, which is a bit unfair because we are only just getting started. So I said, look, the better question is how many could there be? And we use a model called cultural creatives, which says that there are 3 broad psychographics amongst Western people, which is the way that people think. So about half, 55% of the population, they call moderns. Modern people basically don't really see a problem in the world. They don't really see climate change as an issue. But then you've got 15% of what they call conservatives, who are sort of harking back to prior times. And then you've got the cultural creatives that make up about 35% of the public. We've said that we think that a quarter of the cultural creatives would take Vita Sapien as their dominant spiritual philosophy if we can get it in front of them in a compelling manner. And that's really the work that I've been doing over the last few years, is to try and understand how to actually explain this, and then also how to actually roll it out and get it in front of people.
I really, really I really resonated, of course, with the idea of awe. I read an article recently that spoke to the importance of this experience to our mental health. And I think another thing that we're seeing in our society is not just a spiritual vacuum, but also a great deal of mental health breakdown due to this disconnection between the natural world. We're just simply not plugged in the way that we are meant to be. And it's causing a great deal of anguish and societal upheaval. I know that Dr. Carter has spoken with you a lot and that you've had prior conversations. And Peter, maybe you could tell us a bit about your work with Vita Sapiens, and if you have any questions or thoughts, I would love to hear what you have to share.
It's been delightful to actually have a few discussions with Guy here. And he mentions his writing of the philosophy and approach. And every time he sort of did a rewrite, it got better. And so keep writing, Guy, because it's really, really important. I was thinking, how many people have I come across in my climate change work who actually see the issue, the problem, as essentially a spiritual, moral, or ethical one. And you're a very rare character in that respect. Although our late great colleague Stuart Scott, of course, he actually did come from that aspect as well. So my first question would be to you, my friend Guy. So what is it, do you think, in your life or in you that makes you so different? The climate change world I'm talking about.
Yeah, I think a part of it is that I've actually been able to be very free in my adult life to pursue my whim, if you like. And so, I don't have family in Australia. I don't have a mortgage. I don't work a regular job. I've had a lot of time to actually just contemplate and think these things through. I've got, I'm half educated. I've got 2 degrees, a master's degree and a bachelor degree. And so, and I'm just followed the logical pathways, but also I've been specifically looking to find something that hadn't been done in the climate and ecological space. I've been looking for something to sort of kind of pioneer. And I stumbled across the spiritual thing quite by chance. And when I started to read into it a little bit more detail and understand how powerful it was as a tool and how it had been practically ignored almost totally by the environmental movement, it seemed like that was actually the gap analysis. That was the gap. That was something that needed to be filled. And so in my normal fashion, I just jumped in and started to try and figure it out. I think that's the real difference. Like a lot of other people probably would have come to the same conclusion had they had the time and effort. And also, I've spent a lot of time out in the wilds. I used to have a sailing boat. I used to go sailing, and I've had these few instances with these seabirds called Sulolokagaster, which is the brown booby bird. And I've just kind of find this bond with this bird. And then you sort of understand that I have that spirituality connected to nature, whereas a lot of people might never have actually had that in the first place.
So that brings me, unfortunately, to remember that the world's birds are disappearing very fast, certainly where I live, and it's the same everywhere apparently. And even insects, of course, as we know, are disappearing fast. And our scientists, our experts, they keep on researching these matters and they keep on confirming, that, yeah, this is happening. But I think there's a big problem in the so-called objectivity of the scientific world, in which they make it a principle that they will not go near anything they call a value judgment or anything that's moral or ethics or anything like that. They'll just stick to their objective numbers. How do you feel about that?
Well, I think that's science's role, is to be analytical about things. But I guess the question really comes down to the politics of science, which is what are the things that we actually choose to study? And the other thing as well is that whilst the scientists might be actually analytical themselves in their work, they can be a lot less analytical when they speak outside of work hours, if you know what I'm saying. So there are a lot of scientists who would speak in public about their work and are able to actually conjecture more than they could if they were writing in a science paper. And I think that's really important because that helps to sort of show like a shadow truth to the scientific evidence.
Thank you for that. And thank you for that question, Peter. I think that's one of the things that is missing. Is scientists are great at scientists, but we need communicators who can communicate what's happening at a deeper level. And I think that's really just crucial. Paul, I was on a panel with you at COP27, spiritual panel, religious panel on various leaders in spiritual thought. I know that you shared from a spiritual but non-religious perspective. And so, yeah, would love to hear from you as well and what questions you have for Guy.
Thank you, everybody. So, yeah, we had an interfaith session at COP27, and we've also had some previous ones at previous COPs. It seems that quite a few people are sort of on board in the different religions to recognizing the climate crisis problem. And I think, there's more communication within their various communities on it, but there's still the question is how do they leverage you get a lot of people thinking the same way, how do you actually get change in our political system with our government? We can't even get our governments to phase out fossil fuel subsidies at the moment. They keep putting more and more money, especially after COVID, the COVID crisis, into subsidizing fossil fuels. So not only they're not taking a neutral stance, they're taking a corporate favorite stance, and they're much more worried. What they say is about the economy, the economy, the economy, putting more money into it. And yet really, by subsidizing fossil fuels, we all know it's shooting ourselves in the foot. Also, there are some scientists that have very strong spiritual beliefs. At the conference on biodiversity, there was a very interesting session moderated by Katharine Hayhoe, for example, and we did a separate interview for the Climate Emergency Forum with her after. And what was interesting is in our conversation, the spiritual aspect never really came up. So I think that, lots of scientists have these strong spiritual beliefs, but for some reason, they think that it's counter to their science message. I don't know. I mean, how do you sort of bring those two worlds together? Because, the scientific methods are clearly not working to address the climate problem. A lot of the problem, I think, is because of the over compartmentalization of scientists, not enough system thinkers. And when you get to system thinkers and then you get to spirituality, there's a lot of connection between that. Spirituality is all about how things are connected all together. We're all in the same boat, we're all in the same system. So can you talk about spirituality a bit from the systems standpoint?
Yeah, so part of what I've been researching over the last few weeks is to try and understand the origins of spirituality in humans in order to try and frame a better framing of what it actually is. And the work that I've been looking at goes back to what they call the Upper Paleolithic Revolution, which was in Africa around 80,000 years ago and in Europe about 40,000 years ago. If you look at the tools that were being used by those humans, they were relatively basic, and then pretty much overnight there was this explosion in tool complexity, and this is where archery, the first evidence of archery, came in. This is where the cave painting started to get extremely complicated, where funerary practices started to become a lot more detailed. So that was around 40,000 years ago in Europe. So spirituality seems to be embedded, enmeshed in amongst all of those other higher functions of the brain. So the artistic function, but also the rational function, the planning function, the conception of being able to do something now with a result later on. Relatively easy to break a piece of stone to make a sharp stone as a tool. Relatively easy to attach that to the end of a stick to make a spear. Very, very difficult to conceive and build archery equipment, bows and arrows, feathers, and so forth. So all of these things are all kind of tied together. I think that's a part of it, is that you can't really separate spirituality from rationality. And I think like Katharine Hayhoe is a really interesting case study because she's very passionate as a Pentecostalist Christian. She speaks openly about that. And yet there's practically nothing written in Pentecostalism that would actually give her a natural love for the planet, which she obviously has. So I suspect she's what I call a Vitan Christian. So a Christian who has a deep love for the planet. And again, so I think the opportunity for scientists is to, outside of their business hours, is to speak about their love of nature, which would demonstrate their spiritual connection to it.
Thank you for that. I agree that it would be great to have scientists do that. And another thing that you had mentioned, you talked about the creative class. I feel as though I'm confused. Like we're living in a period, we're seeing the end of the world. And I'm wondering, where is Picasso's Guernica? Where is Rachel Carson's Silent Spring? Where are the great artists and thinkers of our time in terms of expressing this in a way that people can relate to, the people who make change? I mean, what are your thoughts about this guy?
I was looking at a Facebook post today, actually, of an African tribe. I just looked at a whole series of photos. I didn't get any context, but these guys the kids were basically doing these absolutely outrageous face paintings, and they're all different colors and all different patterns, and some of them had grasses and hats, and there was an expression of art that blended the individual character into the environment, that if they stood next to a bush, they'd actually disappear within it. So in a way, part of the sort of problem in a way is to sort of look at contemporary art pieces and all of that, like left brain stuff, the way that art can be actually understood as being brilliant because of 10 particular reasons. But there's another type of art, which is where you basically use art to embed yourself into the environment of which you're a part. I don't know if that makes sense as an answer to the question. And also, look, the rate of the decline is so fast that I think it's even amongst the people who are following along, the decline is so fast with the climate here and the ecosystem there, and all the political traumas that are going on and the COVIDization of everything. It's hard for people to actually keep up, to actually know what the hell is actually going on. And I think this is a really important part about Vita's work, is that we've got a frame of reference, like a time frame, that we've got a destination to get to, which we call the verdant age. Others call it ecological civilization. Simply the concept of human civilization acting synergistically with the biosphere. We're developing the tools. We kind of know how to do it, but what we don't know is how to implement it. And this is what Vita's mission is, to try and develop programs that on an individual level, people can actually find awe and wonder in nature. And then through that spiritual revelation to nature, guided by the environmental sciences and observing pointers towards right action, can conceivably create a legion of super empowered individuals that will go out and do what's necessary to fix the mess in the limited time that we've got left. And the only way to do that is for something like Vita Sapien to explode on the planet as fast as possible and properly funded. And I'll give you an example of that, is the way that the oil company BP paid Ogilvy Mayer $100 million to get their creatives to figure out how to have the whole world think that climate change was their fault and not the fault of the oil companies bribing the governments. $100 million campaign, it did it. So if you imagine something like that, call it 100 million to use an argument, a number, a campaign to spread eco-spirituality through the world through programs where people, whether you take them to the forest or whether you take them to an overgrown lot with some sort of a VR or whatever the program is, there's got to be ways. And this is what we want to find the funding for, is to actually develop these awakening programs. And I think everybody's ready for it. The Vita story is designed to blend seamlessly in with whatever your existing spiritual beliefs are.
That's great. If people want to help, or if they have ideas from funding, is there a way that they can reach out to you?
Yeah, so the email is vitaplaneta@gmail.com. Just on the website, it's written on the website. And the funding is, it always seems to be wrong to be talking about money when you're talking about spirituality. But this idea only really exists on a website and a few books and some cards that maybe 50 people in the whole world have actually seen. If this theory that I have, that we can actually use spirituality to motivate extraordinary behavior in people, is to be tested, it needs to be tested properly, and that needs resourcing.
So Guy, you mentioned your website. Could you give us the URL so people can actually find you? And by the way, those of you who are watching, we'll put that in the description, the show notes as well. But Guy, your website address?
It's vitasapien.org. So VITA SAPIEN.org. Vita Sapien broadly translates to life wise. So wise about our personal life, but also wise about our place amongst life on earth. Vitasapien.org.
Oh, thank you so much, Guy. Paul, I'm wondering if you had some other thoughts or questions?
I think attendance for people in mainstream religious groups, if attendance at church is any indication, I think it's down quite a bit across Canada. In fact, some churches are becoming condos or selling off half of their lots and things because they can't get funding. It seems to me like the spirituality and religious thought has been kind of replaced by consumerism, I guess, in my view. Consumerism, buying more stuff, and all that is very bad for the planet. So if we can get back to some sort of spirituality, as you're suggesting, for the earth, that could really sort of make inroads into reducing consumerism. I mean, have you thought about those aspects?
Absolutely. Regina made a point that there was this sort of spiritual void in people. I think that's the wrong phraseology. We're all spiritual creatures, but we just fill that chamber with different things, right? And so most Western people, the moderns in the cultural creative framework, 55% of the public, kind of fill their spiritual vessel with consumerism, with sports, with fishing, with holidays. I mean, you can have a fulfilled life that seems to answer all the world's questions, big questions in life. What are we here for? Oh, to go travel, go and watch the footy. That's a perfectly reasonable answer. But but spirituality expresses itself into the real world through our actions and inactions. It's the motivator of our behavior. And so this is why if we can change spiritual belief, and then behavior naturally follows behind it. And if you can have a transformative, powerful change of spiritual belief, like that, oh my goodness moment, right? When you finally get that we're a part of the ecosystem and it's going, right? That can potentially trigger extraordinary, huge new behaviors in people.
I see parallels between spirituality and like wisdom. Wisdom is very, very different from knowledge or people's beliefs. And, I think, with all of the information available, it tends to, on the web, et cetera, digital media, it tends to make people more shallow in their thinking. There's not as much deep thinking going on. There's not as much wisdom. It's just consuming information and then using that to consume products that have to be made, which then harm, the whole ecosystem.
I mean, I think also that whole notion of consuming the mental consumption vis-a-vis social media is just completely distracting people from what's important in the world, not just in their own lives, but in all of our lives. And that's just, it's really so sad because we're all missing this opportunity to meet this great challenge, and everyone's swiping left or right,
Yeah, and this is the point as well, is that people can believe anything, right? This is the really important point, is that spirituality isn't automatically guided towards the caring for the ecosystem. It's a vessel that gets filled with pretty much anything. So if we can just guide people to believe the right things, then the actions follow. And the way to do that is to have some sort of structure. One of the texts that advises my work with Vita Sapien is called Blue Ocean Strategy. And there's a book that came out of the Singapore University's Business School. And they basically looked at these really companies that had really stood out from the crowd. Blue ocean refers to an ocean that isn't saturated with blood from the sharks and competition. It's about organizations or companies that don't have competition. And they basically identified that these companies that stood out had taken standard business models and then made these distinctive and specific changes to them to try and, for example, they look at Cirque du Soleil as an example. The most expensive part of running a circus is the animals and the star performers. So they don't have animals and star performers. And they target their marketing to people that don't go to the circus, because there's a lot more of people that don't go to the circus than people that do go to the circus. So we've tried to take the sort of standard spiritual religious sort of model and use blue ocean thinking on it to find a way to create something which is compelling to people, that doesn't have all of the nasty, horrible dogma, that doesn't have all of the insane beliefs, that doesn't have this sort of doom and gloom and like pressure and somebody's looking over your shoulder and you're going to go to hell. We're trying to create a spiritual philosophy, sort of like the way that Shinto is in Japanese religion, that in Japanese society, that it just is a part of society to see yourself as a part of the ecosystem, just the way that the Cro-Magnon people would have when spirituality first evolved, in this case, in the Europeans.
I really like the idea of encouraging people to see themselves as a part of the ecosystem, because as I had mentioned in the beginning, too many of us are just separate. We're just separate from the planet in which we inhabit. Therein lies so much of the problem. And I really want to thank you so much, Guy, for sharing your wisdom, for sharing Vita Sapiens with us. And I hope that for those of you watching that do want to feel that you're a part of something, that you learned something, you learned about a group that maybe you might be interested in. You can head over to the website. And I hope that you're also interested in Climate Emergency Forum and that you have subscribed. And if you haven't, this would be a great time to do so. And make sure to like and share this video. And if you have any other ideas on how you fill your spiritual life and how you connect with the planet, please share it with us in the comments. It would be great to see your thoughts. And meanwhile, we look forward to seeing you at the next Climate Emergency Forum.